And the reason, because I was taught, this guy wrote something about teaching in an article, and then I wrote him and said your article was highly interesting, and we just started with a back and forth about stuff, and I said I had this thing that I had written for years and I wondered was it of any interest to the community, and he said, you know what, we're starting a blog, maybe you can put it there. So that's how I've been in touch with this thing, and I see the various things that come up there. But essentially it's sort of reflections from mathematicians about education matters. And I'll send it out, just the overall information to it. So, any closing comments on slopes? Yes?
I got a little distracted during the trip part because I was thinking about like the way she had the blocks, the same blocks to show that ratio. At first I was like, I feel like I could throw a whole lot of people off, especially when you're trying to break it away from straight lines. And then, so being in my education class right now, I start breaking it down into like an exercise you could do with the kids. And even if you have like a curved line and like a piece of paper, they have strips of paper, and you have a pick a point, or you give them points in a line so it works out well. And they have to like measure those spots and then fold their papers in like the same length blocks. Are y'all following at all? That's what I want them to do. And then they would do it at the other point on the graph where like the slope is different, and then do it again, and they would see that the same line can have different slopes. And then I feel like you could get like a good understanding that would eventually lead into some calculus and crazy things. Does that make sense? Would that work, do you think? If I followed that?
I think anything you do will help. I think because everything will force you to things. It may be a direct application that hits somebody, and if it doesn't, it'll make them stop and think and see. At least for me, it'll make me stop and think, why is this relevant?
Yeah.
Where does this fit in?
I don't think this is really to be used for teaching calculus. It's more for laying the groundwork that they're going to use on it, because when they have, if they have even the rudiments of calculus, they've got slope.
Yeah.
Because that's a derivative. Well, I would hope so.
They have the mechanics of it, but
Am I
Roger is coming
assuming?
back and wondering, huh?
Well, you said they, when they're taking calculus, they have the rudiments. I wish the hell they would.
Well, that's what
I wish the hell they had them when they finished calculus and got into physics.
The last time that you were here, I was telling you about the kid that I was tutoring
Yes.
who he wanted to solve for the sine squared x cosine squared x equals 1. He wanted to solve for that and then plug it into his limit, but he had no cosine squared x anywhere in there or whatever it was. Like, you would hope they would have like the basic knowledge of the subject they were in, but sometimes they don't.
Yeah, a lot of times they don't at all. And that's what I'm really,
And
it seems like,
kind of push
is,
through.
what class is he in?
He was in calculus.
In what?
Yeah, see, so that's bad.
Cal one.
But like, I've just seen, I mean, just college algebra, like they're supposed to learn, so, I think college algebra is like the worst class ever. I hope I don't really offend anybody by that. But it's so like diverse that they learn like 5 million different things
kind of jumps
in
all over
one
the place.
semester. And
feel like
I mean,
they're
I'm even sitting there like,
them.
whoa, we went from this to this, and like,
It's kind
okay,
of the
give me a
same
break.
homework too. Like they
Yeah.
go from one like crazy topic to another crazy
And there's no
topic.
connection.
And there's,
between
yeah,
them.
and like, I mean,
It's-
we're
it's
just
stressful.
factoring right now and then solving, and so we're doing quadratic equation and solving by like squares and a perfect square, and we did, in one assignment, we had like one of each.
It's really
I'm
nice,
like,
but it's really
and you're supposed to understand this.
Yeah,
It's a
and
very-
that's
I
whenever
just-
they start learning steps and procedures and not, that was my biggest problem. That whenever I took college algebra online in high school, I was just like, well, I know that to get the correct answer on this one, I do these 3 steps and it works. And
Yeah,
then when I got to college, Dr. Dwyer is seeing a lot of this, and me trying to like break away from the procedure part and like what's actually happening. And so that was what I was thinking with this slope thing, is it's hard to go from finding the slope of a straight line that's consistently always that line, and then switch that over to when you see a line that just kind of goes wacko after
Yeah.
a minute. And so that's, I mean, I think that's where the problem comes in with the rise over run business, where I can see now how like this ratio thing, that could be used. Like you just slide your pieces bigger until they match
yeah,
whatever new spot you have.
yeah.
But I'm just curious, so Katie, are you saying you're doing some of this in an education class right now?
Oh, no, whenever I said that, I mean, like I went from what we were talking about to like in our classes, we're having to do a hook for things, and so it's like hooking your students into whatever subject, and that usually means like putting in something in front of them for them to play with, or like PB&J comes into play a lot with like looking at triangles. Look, I made a PB&J and cut it in half, and triangles are everywhere. It goes from that kind of like really rudimentary stuff to where like the one we're doing tomorrow is we're giving them tacks and cardboard and string, and we're like, draw an ellipses, you know, and then we like throw it into, you know, planet orbit things, because it's, well, I think tomorrow is Euler's like anniversary of his death or something, and that's why we got started on that.
Is that secondary education?
Mhm.
That sounds like.
Yeah, and so that's the thing that's been really different is like, the approach they're having us come at is that in a lot of math courses, you can't just lecture, even in high school, because even though you think they could have an attention span for that long, even in like our education classes as college students, they switch things every 20 minutes. And I've gotten a lot out of it, because every 20 minutes we're like either changing the way we're sitting in the classroom, or we're going from the board to like our papers. And so that's kind of what this thing is that we're playing with something with our hands, whether it's tacks or paper or whatever. And then we can apply it on like a practice worksheet, and then like have someone go to the board and do it. And so that's why
I never
this
thought
has got
of it.
really dynamic.
But like my math professor, or my math teacher in high school was super successful with
Mhm.
teaching almost everybody. I mean, everybody loved going to math class really. But we
Where
always
did-
were doing that.
Where did you go?
Big Sandy, Montana. Like, I mean, it was, I mean, she taught every single math class
That's what my
to,
teacher was.
what, 7 through 12. I mean, so
David,
she was,
Teach
but,
Teach slow.
she was awesome because, you know, you'd sit there and she'd lecture, and then she'd, you know, do a practice problem, and she'd go around the class and like have you kind of help her get through the problem, and then she'd be like, okay, we'll go to the board.
Yeah.
And we only, I think, had 50-minute class periods, so we probably were like about 20 minutes, and then did 20 minutes on the board, and then came back and sat down and gave us our assignment or something. But I've never ever thought about that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
that's
she
the way
always
it
made us go to
works.
the board, and
Yeah.
like we were doing something, and then we came back and did something else.
Even now, I'm coming up on 30 faster than I would like, but
Yeah.
but
it's just,
even now, I find that classes that are like 50-minute classes versus my 80-minute classes,
Yeah.
I'm a lot easier able to focus in on those classes for the whole period
Yes.
versus the other ones when I'm being lectured to without having to stop and do something. I mean, I end up
Exactly.
copying PowerPoints, not that I don't have PowerPoints already in front of me, but just to keep myself engaged,
Mhm.
do something. And
Yeah.
So I know it would be really hard to do in a college class to like switch up, especially in math college
Yes.
classes. It would be really hard to not do the board stuff. But you do a good job of like, okay, we've done some stuff on the board. Let's like break into groups for a second. So at least they like change
Kind of do
directions
something
real
a little
quick.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes a big difference. So I think the slope stuff, looking at it differently with either like blocks, and then we're gonna look at it in fractions.
Well,
I think that does well.
this,
I got a
um,
class.
Who's the professor I have now? I can't think of his name. I'm a horrible name for name
English
person.
course.
He's
You
teaching
stopped that video.
number theory.
Try
He's
it.
doing number theory.
Mechanics.
Yes.
Next door, yes?
Yes, he's awesome because like usually in most of, you know, your classes, you know, they'll just write proofs and do things, and then here's a corollary, and here's a, you know, here's the proof of this, and blah, 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 and just is writing. And it's been really different and kind of, I feel like I'm actually starting to understand a lot of things that